that's if you believe in some cabal and some deep state, Pierce, that all these Democrats are working together, and they
Yes,
unloaded on Trump
I do.
four separate indictments,
Yeah.
Pierce.
I literally
separate
think that's what's been going on. Yeah, I do. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not a conservative.
Earlier today, shortly before the first presidential debate of 2024, self-professed nonpartisan journalist Piers Morgan hosted his latest pro-Trump, anti-Biden panel in which he graded Trump on a curve and misrepresented the truth, and was, alongside the Trump campaign's own press secretary, roasted by progressive comedian Francesca Fiorentini, and we've got to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video, and they are all from the most recent, and I say most recent because he hosts them regularly, pro-Trump, anti-Biden panel from Piers Morgan, who claims to be a nonpartisan journalist, but is in fact, when it comes to American politics, quite partisan, and it's manifest in his content. I'm going to start with this clip here. It's really funny. Francesca Fiorentini, who hosts the Bituation Room, she's a comedian, she's a progressive. She doesn't even like President Biden all that much, but she recognizes Donald Trump is worse. And when asked about who will win the upcoming debate, she says Donald Trump will, but she gives a really funny reason why.
Here's what I think. I think actually, surprisingly, I think Trump's going to win this. Like, I truly think he can win this debate. All he has to do is not talk about abortion rights, labor rights, healthcare and how he promised to replace Obamacare with something better but never did, climate change and how he promised oil executives that he would kill the electric vehicle if they gave him $1 billion. Any plans for the next 4 years, like how he wants to replace all federal employees with loyalists, his indictments, his convictions, his payouts, the 2020 election, COVID-19, shark attacks, or how he low-key wants to sleep with his own daughter. If he can avoid that, he's going to win.
I love her. She is hilarious. She is a genuinely funny person. She's, again, very critical of President Biden, the way that many progressives are. But again, she also creates no false equivalence here. It also says something to me that Pierce's instinct on a pro-Trump, anti-Biden panel is to try to recruit as many progressives who are as anti-Biden as possible, I suppose, hoping that they will direct some of their ire towards President Biden, right? Because again, that's a way to stack the panel in Donald Trump's favor. But again, I love that Francesca Fiorentini, she makes her issues with Biden known. She mentions it a couple of times in this video, but she doesn't fall into that trap. She will never create a false equivalence between the convicted felon former president and the man currently in the Oval Office. But again, hilarious. Even Piers Morgan cracked a smile there because she's funny. She mentions, yeah, listen, if Trump doesn't mention all of the legitimately stupid and terrible things about him, his aspirations, his agenda, and his record, he'll be fine. And I think that's indeed the case, that if he actually avoids all the basically, if he just stands there and is quiet, he stands a better chance, in my opinion, of winning the debate. Great stuff from Francesca Fiorentini. Then the topic turns to Joe Walsh, the gentleman beside Francesca Fiorentini, who is a former Republican congressman. He used to be a Trump supporter. Now he's an outspoken critic of Donald Trump. And he and Piers Morgan have a lengthy back and forth in which Piers Morgan misrepresents the truth and grades Donald Trump on a curve.
And I think a lot of people are looking forward to this debate. I disagree with you, though, on what you just said about, painting Trump as the threat to democracy that he is. I think Biden has to say that. I don't want him to yell and scream for an hour and a half, but I want Joe Biden to point at Donald Trump and say, this is a guy who refused to accept the results of the last election. He never conceded. He tried to overthrow an election. And as he stands before us today, America, he's refusing to say he'll accept the results of this election if he loses. Biden cannot normalize Trump.
What if Trump just turns around? Hang on. What if Trump just turns to him and says, really, you think I'm a threat to democracy? What about a political opponent, you, who spent the entire year getting left-leaning people in the legal world to throw criminal charges at me, even convict me on one of shuffling paperwork involving a one-night stand with a porn star 20 years ago, in what most people, including many independents, see was a ridiculous overreach and a weaponization of the justice system, which has only led to one thing, again, more popularity for Trump, hundreds of millions of dollars now pouring in from people who just feel like this was a disgusting way to treat a former president of the United States, the only one to be dragged through criminal courts, and then adding, and by the way, what about the attempts to get me off the ballot? If that isn't an assault on democracy, what is? So, yeah, you've got a point. I was very critical of Trump over refusing to accept the result of the last election, very critical of his involvement in January 6th. But the Democrats haven't got a leg to stand on when it comes to preserving democracy. They've been fire burning it all year.
So the problem is Piers Morgan just lied about all of that. He either, as somebody, again, who wishes Piers Morgan would bring some of his foreign policy, willingness to play the devil's advocate, right? There he does act like a relatively nonpartisan journalist in the sense that he will ask tough questions of anyone he's talking to, right? But again, when it comes to domestic policy, he is just decidedly pro-Trump, and he's wrong on the facts, either because he just doesn't know them or because, again, he's trying to grade Trump on a curve. But a couple of things. Number one, there is no evidence, none, before we get to Joe Walsh's response. There is no evidence whatsoever that President Biden or the White House interfaced with or communicated with or worked with Alvin Bragg in Manhattan, Fani Willis in Fulton County, or anywhere else to prosecute Donald Trump. And all of these prosecutions had to go through a grand jury of Americans who were presented with the evidence, and they were the ones who recommended the charges against him. There's no evidence whatsoever. Fani Willis, Alvin Bragg in particular, are not employees of Joe Biden. They don't work for the president. They're in a completely different jurisdiction. So he has no evidence for what his claims are. And again, as Ben Shapiro would say, facts don't care about your feelings. The other thing is he said, Joe Biden tried to get him kicked off the ballot. Except President Biden didn't do that. He was not party to any of the lawsuits or any of the legal challenges trying to disqualify Donald Trump by way of the 14th Amendment. As a matter of fact, they were all brought by Republican voters in Colorado and in other states. Republican voters filed suit saying that Trump was disqualified under the 14th Amendment. Biden had nothing to do with it. As a matter of fact, Biden didn't even give an opinion on it, that he didn't think he should be disqualified or not. He said the courts will decide, and then he abided by their decision. So again, no evidence whatsoever for Pierce's claims and plenty of evidence to the contrary. Let's get to Joe's response.
Oh, that's if you believe in some cabal and some deep state, Pierce, that all these Democrats are working together, and they yes. unloaded on Trump four separate indictments.
Yeah.
Pierce,
I literally think that's what's been going on. Yeah, I do. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not a conservative. I'm just down the middle journalist, but I see things for what they are. There has been a collaborative weaponization of the justice system, which has blown right back in the Democrat faces. Yeah.
And if you're...
So again, this is where Piers Morgan's just weak on the facts. A couple of things. Number one, his BFF, Donald Trump, explicitly campaigned in 2016 and in 2024 and in 2020 as the sitting president on prosecuting his political opponents. He didn't just chant lock her up with respect to Hillary Clinton. As the president in 2020, he repeatedly, publicly, privately tried to pressure Attorney General Bill Barr to prosecute Joe Biden, Barack Obama, next president. I thought presidents were supposed to be immune to that sort of thing. Pierce, why didn't you speak up then? Very interesting. And also Hillary Clinton as well. He did that as the sitting president. The fact that he was not successful, the fact that Bill Barr and Trump's own DOJ kind of ignored him, that's not a point in Trump's favor. That just means that there was either no case to be made against Biden, Obama, and Clinton, or perhaps the DOJ tried to do that and found that a case couldn't be made. We don't know. But again, an attempted murderer doesn't get credit for failing in the murder attempt. Donald Trump corruptly tried to weaponize the DOJ explicitly against his political opponents. We have no evidence, none, zero, that President Biden has attempted to do that. And again, Piers Morgan and Republicans and conservatives, they didn't care. Now they care because, of course, they have no principles. Anything that grades Trump on a curve. I can also point out that, as we've discussed in previous videos, President Biden's own Department of Justice prosecuted his only living son, Hunter. President Biden could have snapped his fingers and made that go away from day one. The second Biden was inaugurated, he could have fired the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney investigating his son. He has full constitutional authority to do so. There's nothing, not a damn thing, that the courts or that Congress could do about it because Weiss was an executive branch employee. As a matter of fact, U.S. attorneys typically tender their resignations. They offer their resignations to the new president, whoever it is, because they recognize their political appointees. Biden not only didn't accept his resignation, Biden said, no, I need you to stay on and continue. He could have ordered Attorney General Merrick Garland to fire David Weiss after Weiss became a special counsel. Again, at any point, he could have just said, fire the guy. And if Garland didn't do that, he could have fired Garland and put in place someone who would. He also had the power to snap his fingers and pardon his son. He could have pardoned Hunter Biden on January 20th, 2021, and at any point in between. He also has the power to pardon him now. He also had the power to order Garland to withdraw the prosecution. The courts couldn't compel Hunter Biden's prosecution. The judiciary, the court can't demand that the DOJ prosecute somebody. That's exclusively the purview of the executive branch. So 3 or 4 different ways for Biden to snap his fingers and make all of it go away. And he didn't. To say nothing of the fact that the Department of Justice under President Biden is indeed prosecuting elected Democrats during a brutal election season. In the Senate, in the House, they're prosecuting at least as many Democrats as they are Republicans. No evidence whatsoever. Piers Morgan, of course, is just lying on Trump's behalf, or he's ignorant on the facts. Either way, he's wrong, and I'm right, and so are the rest of us who side with facts and truth. A couple of other clips I want to play.
Yeah. No, I'm actually, I'm not here to defend Biden's. Look, Biden's brain is basically turning into the soft serve that he loves so much. But honestly, look at his actual cabinet and what they're doing. I mean, to Carolyn's point, they're going after Ticketmaster and Adobe. They're suing Adobe and they're suing Amazon. They're suing them for what? For ripping off customers. The Department of Transportation right now is requiring airlines that if they cancel your flight, they got to pay you back in full. That's putting money in American people's pockets. Look, I have crazy critiques of Joe Biden, specifically around the assault on Gaza and continuing the border policies of Donald Trump, which include denying asylum to migrants who are seeking a better life and escaping. It's illegal under international law to do that. But he's just picking up where Trump left off. But honestly, in terms of the economy, it's not one of them. Giving massive student debt relief to millions and millions of Americans, it's just not one of them. He's pretty strong there. And like you said, Piers, he could probably just stand there. And Trump, look, here's the thing with Trump. Give him a lot of rope, guys. I'm sure this is part of Carolyn's strategy.
Well, actually,
Give him so much rope, and he will hang himself with it. Let's watch.
So again, I played that to give you context here. Francesca Fiorentini is not a fan of President Biden. She's not a fan. She has progressive principled objections to things that go on under his administration. But again, she recognizes that Donald Trump is just objectively worse. And she also is willing to give President Biden credit for good things. And she mentions the economy. As we've discussed, the macroeconomic indicators are much better under President Biden than they were under Trump, especially when you consider that Trump inherited a good economy. Like the macroeconomic trends of the Trump-era economy were continuations, mere continuations of Obama-era trends. Now, Trump and MAGA and Piers Morgan want you to believe that Donald Trump single-handedly created, again, the 2017 through 2019 economy. He didn't. He inherited it. Again, he inherited the construction of the skyscrapers, the one I always go to. George W. Bush leaves Obama a gaping pit. Obama, in 2 terms, builds an incomplete skyscraper. It's 100 stories tall. Trump inherits the project, adds a couple more stories, and then the whole thing collapses on his watch. Centrists like Piers, Donald Trump, MAGA Republicans, they want you to believe that Obama did nothing. Trump did everything except the bad stuff. You can't blame him for it. And then somehow want to grade President Biden on the strongest possible terms when, in fact, President Biden, like basically every other Democrat who inherits the mess left for them by a Republican president, had to do it all on his own or under a Democratic administration. We reject that. The facts are that Democrats are better stewards of the economy than Republicans. That's been a consistent theme for decades. Now, Piers might appeal to the popularity, right? But that's polling. That measures perception. That measures feelings. And if you want to make the case that Democrats need to persuade people and have done a terrible job of doing that, that's fine. That's a fair criticism to make. But the facts are the facts, and the facts favor President Biden and the Democrats. And there's nothing that Piers Morgan can say to change that. One other clip I want to play, which is this exchange between Francesca Fiorentini and Carolyn Levitt, who is the Trump campaign's press secretary.
What's Joe Biden promising to do in a second term if he's given one? Tax the American people more. He has actually pledged to sign the largest tax increase in American history, and it will rob the average working family
on corporations, Carolyn. Like, let's remember, inflation is not inflation. It's greedflation. Greedflation is when corporations...
Inflation is the greatest tax on the American worker. It's the greatest tax of the American worker.
Yes, because it is created by corporations that basically charge the American people whatever they want to charge. Did you try and get Taylor Swift concert tickets, Carolyn? Tell me you did. And if you were lucky enough, amazing. But
No,
Joe Biden's
because they're
doing
too
those kinds of things.
expensive and no one can afford them.
Exactly.
And people can't afford
And
the
who's
flights
actually
you're
trying to
talking
rein
about.
in corporate greedflation? It's Joe Biden. I don't like
It
this
has
guy.
nothing-
But you got to give him a win. Even Piers is giving him a win, man. And it's on the economy specifically.
Yeah. Now, Piers would say, well, compared to some other places, the U.S. economy is not bad. Again, he understates it. And he understates it in this episode, too, because he has to grade Trump on a curve. He has to downplay anything associated with Biden. The fact of the matter is the U.S. economy is by far the best in the world right now. And it has been under President Biden's stewardship. It is objectively much better than what Piers Morgan wants to give it credit for. And if the situation was reversed, if the president right now were Donald Trump, Piers Morgan would be describing the current U.S. economy under the same macroeconomic conditions very differently because, again, he grades Trump on a curve, which is irrational, dishonest, and partisan. So those are the facts. Let me know what you think in the comments.